My boyfriend stole my dad's retirement money to meet his online dream girl. It began, as so many modern tragedies do, with the hypnotic blue glow of a phone screen in a darkened room. The descent was gradual, a slow poisoning of the quiet, comfortable life Oscar and I had built together. It started in March, with TikTok. At first, his new fascination seemed harmless, just another fleeting internet obsession. We'd be curled up on our old, worn-in sectional couch, the one we'd proudly hauled up 3 flights of stairs 2 years prior, a cheap Netflix movie droning on in the background, and he'd be scrolling. The videos were always the same: impeccably dressed Korean girls demonstrating elaborate 10-step skincare routines, sizzling street food vendors in Seoul, clips of impossibly synchronized K-pop groups. It was just a cultural curiosity, I told myself, a harmless rabbit hole. But then the comments started, little verbal paper cuts that drew blood I didn't realize I was losing. "Korean girls just take better care of themselves," he murmured one evening, his eyes still glued to his phone as he glanced up at me. I was in my standard post-work attire, a pair of faded Old Navy sweatpants and an oversized Target t-shirt with a faded graphic of the Beatles. I'd just finished a grueling double shift at the restaurant, and the grime of the day still clung to me. My hair was in a messy bun, my face was bare, and all I wanted was a hot shower and 8 hours of sleep. I laughed it off, a tight, uncomfortable sound. "Well, I guess I'm failing," I joked, but the comment lingered, a tiny, sharp stone in my shoe. A week later, the comparisons became more direct, more personal. He started holding the phone up, forcing me to look. "Look how straight her hair is," he said, showing me a video of some influencer with a sheet of glossy, black hair that seemed to defy humidity and gravity. "So shiny. Korean beauty standards are just higher." His tone wasn't malicious, not yet. It was casual, observational, which somehow made it worse. It wasn't an attack. It was a statement of fact, a verdict on my own appearance. By April, the phone was a permanent extension of his hand. His morning routine, which used to consist of him groggily hitting the snooze button and then cuddling with me for 10 minutes, was replaced by an immediate 6 a.m. scroll session. He'd lie there beside me, the rapid-fire audio of TikToks filling the pre-dawn silence, his thumb working tirelessly as he consumed an endless feed under the hashtags #KoreanBeauty and #WatchKoreanGirl. Our dinners at the small kitchen table, once a time for us to reconnect and talk about our days, became tutorials I had never signed up for. "See how she does her makeup?" he'd ask, holding up a video of a girl applying blush with a delicate, precise touch. "It's natural, but still so put together." The unspoken addendum hung in the air. "Unlike you." The pressure was subtle but immense. I started to change, piece by piece, hoping to win back the attention that was now solely devoted to the women on his screen. I started waking up earlier to wear more makeup to my job as a waitress. I bought a cheap Conair hair straightener from Target and began the daily ritual of scorching my naturally wavy hair into submission. My trusted, simple CeraVe cleanser, which had served me faithfully for 3 years, was relegated to the back of the bathroom drawer, replaced by a multi-step Korean skincare regimen I'd ordered from Amazon, complete with essences, serums, and ampoules whose functions I barely understood. The products smelled nice, the packaging was beautiful, but when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a better version of myself. I saw a woman desperately trying to become someone else. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. One afternoon, while I was folding laundry on our bed, a mundane domestic task that suddenly felt like an indictment of my entire being, he came over with his phone. "You should really learn to do winged eyeliner like this," he said, showing me another close-up tutorial. He paused, his eyes sweeping over me, from my tired face down to my comfortable sweatpants. "And maybe lose some weight," he added, his voice still infuriatingly casual. "Asian girls stay so petite." That was the moment the stone in my shoe became a shard of glass in my heart. The casual cruelty was no longer deniable. This wasn't about cultural appreciation. This was about him finding me lacking, measuring me against an impossible, digitally curated standard, and declaring me a failure. But instead of getting angry, I got desperate. I signed up for a Planet Fitness membership that same week, the cloying purple and yellow branding feeling like a personal mockery. I started skipping my lunch breaks, replacing the hearty sandwich I used to get from the deli across from work with chalky, unsatisfying protein bars. The hunger pangs were a constant, gnawing reminder of my inadequacy. In late April, the physical chasm between us became a literal one. Oscar started sleeping on the couch. "I just need better sleep for work," he'd claimed, avoiding my eyes. "You move around too much at night." It was a flimsy excuse. I'd always been a restless sleeper, and it had never bothered him before. When I tried to initiate any physical contact, a simple hug or a kiss as he left for his job at the auto parts store, he would stiffen and pull away. "I'm just not feeling it lately," he'd mutter. "Too much stress from work." But he wasn't too stressed to spend hours on his phone, the relentless blue light of the screen casting long, dancing shadows on the bedroom ceiling until 2 or 3 in the morning. I would lie awake in our bed, the empty space beside me a cold, gaping wound, listening to the endless, repetitive loop of his scrolling. The small affections, the verbal glue that holds a relationship together, vanished entirely. He stopped complimenting me. He stopped saying, "I love you," before he left in the morning. The little rituals that had defined our life together were erased, one by one. I tried so hard to bridge the gap, to become the woman he was watching. I'd put on the Korean sheet masks he'd shown an interest in, lying on the couch with a cold, slimy paper clinging to my face, but he would barely look up from his screen. I spent an entire Sunday afternoon mastering a Korean fried chicken recipe I'd found online, filling our small apartment with a smell of ginger and gochujang, but he ate only 2 bites before pushing his plate away, declaring he wasn't hungry. My trust, once a solid and unquestionable foundation, began to crumble. I started doing something I never thought I would. I checked his phone. When he'd leave it on the kitchen counter to go to the bathroom, I'd snatch it up, my heart pounding with a mixture of guilt and dread. TikTok was always the most recently used app. His liked videos were a vast, digital harem of hundreds, maybe thousands of Korean girls. They were doing makeup tutorials, eating aesthetically pleasing meals in pristine cafes, wearing the crop tops and mini skirts he'd started to favor. His search history was a roadmap of his obsession: Korean restaurants in our city, Korean language learning apps, Korean cultural sites. He wasn't just watching, he was planning. He was immersing himself in a world where I clearly didn't belong. In early June, just as I was beginning to drown in a sea of hopelessness, a lifeline appeared. My dad called me at work, his voice buzzing with a poorly concealed excitement. "I've been saving up for months to surprise you both," he'd said. "Oscar knows all about it. He's been helping me plan something really special. Just you wait, honey. He's going to surprise you soon." I hung up the phone, a fragile, unfamiliar feeling blooming in my chest. Hope. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of the old warmth. Maybe this was the reason for his distance. Maybe the stress he'd been talking about wasn't from work, but from the pressure of planning a grand, romantic gesture. Maybe he was going to propose. A vacation, I thought. He was planning a trip for us, a chance to get away from his phone, from those videos, from the suffocating atmosphere of our apartment. A chance for our relationship to get back to normal. The thought was intoxicating. I clung to it like a drowning woman to a piece of driftwood. That weekend, I went shopping. I bought a new sundress from Nordstrom Rack, a floral print that I thought would look beautiful against a tropical sunset. I bought a pair of sandals that would be perfect for walking on a beach. I spent hours online, not looking at his search history but at my own, researching romantic destinations, imagining us in Paris, in Rome, on a white sand beach somewhere, with Oscar looking at me, really looking at me, instead of at his screen. The morning of June 15th, I woke up to an empty apartment. His side of the bed was cold, the sheets undisturbed. A quick, frantic search confirmed my rising panic. His clothes were gone from our shared closet, not just a few things, but everything. His work uniform, his weekend jeans, even his heavy winter jacket. His toothbrush was missing from the holder in the bathroom. His phone charger was gone from his nightstand, and his expensive gaming headset was gone from the computer desk. There was no note on the kitchen table. No text message. No missed calls. Just a profound, screaming silence. I called him 18 times between 7 in the morning and noon, my panic escalating with each unanswered ring. Every call went straight to voicemail. "The mailbox for this user is full." The automated voice was a cold, indifferent messenger of my abandonment. I drove to his workplace, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. His manager, a kind man who had been to our apartment for dinner once, told me he'd called in sick. I went to his best friend Jerry's house, my heart pounding against my ribs. Jerry looked genuinely confused, telling me he hadn't seen or heard from Oscar in 2 weeks. I spiraled, my calls becoming more frantic, more desperate. I contacted his brother in Phoenix, his mother in Tampa, his old college roommate, former coworkers I found on LinkedIn. Nobody had heard from him. He had simply vanished. On June 16th, feeling like I was losing my mind, I filed a missing person report. The police officer who took my statement was polite but dismissive. "Ma'am, adults have the right to leave," he'd said, his tone suggesting this was a common, tedious occurrence. He asked if there were signs of depression, of financial trouble. I didn't know how to explain that the only sign was his obsession with a fantasy world on his phone. The break in the case came on June 18th. Jerry called, his voice heavy with reluctance. "I didn't want to get in the middle of this," he'd said, "but I need to show you something Oscar sent me." A moment later, a WhatsApp photo appeared on my screen. It was Oscar, standing at an airport gate, a wide, triumphant grin plastered on his face. He was holding up his boarding pass for the camera. The text on the ticket was sharp, undeniable. American Airlines, Flight 271 to Incheon International Airport, Seoul. Departure. June 15th, 5:30 a.m. One way. My world tilted on its axis. The surprise trip. The planning with my dad. It was all real, except I was never part of the plan. When I called my dad to tell him that Oscar was gone, that he was in South Korea, he broke down, his voice choked with sobs. I gave him $15,000, he confessed, his words shattering what was left of my heart. My retirement savings. He said it was for your surprise trip together. That night, I sat alone on our couch, the same spot where he had spent months watching videos of Korean girls while meticulously planning his great escape. I looked at the array of Korean skincare products lining my bathroom counter, a museum of my own inadequacy. I thought of the winged eyeliner I had practiced applying every single morning, the gym membership card still tucked in my wallet, the sundress hanging in my closet, a pathetic symbol of my naive, imaginary romantic getaway. 12,000 miles away, Oscar was living out his Korean fantasy, funded by the sweat and sacrifice of my father's life savings. He thought he could just disappear, leaving me with nothing but an empty side of the closet and my dad's broken heart. He was wrong. The 3 days following the discovery of Oscar's betrayal were a chaotic vortex of tears, anger, and sickening revelations. I felt like I was operating in a fog, my mind struggling to process the sheer scale of his deception. The messages of support from strangers online were a strange and unexpected comfort. A chorus of voices reminding me I wasn't crazy, that his behavior was as monstrous as it felt. The person who commented that he would come crawling back when reality hit had no idea how prophetic their words would be. After Jerry sent me that grinning airport photo, I tried calling Oscar again, a futile, desperate act. Still straight to voicemail. I spent that first night composing and sending about 20 WhatsApp messages, each one a different shade of my emotional turmoil. They started with confused pleading, morphed into righteous fury, and ended with a single, bleak question. Why? The messages all showed as delivered, 2 stark blue checkmarks confirming they had reached his phone, but they were never marked as read. It was a new, modern form of ghosting, a deliberate and cruel silence from the other side of the world. My dad came over the next day, his face a gray, crumpled mask of grief and shame. He sat at my kitchen table, in the very chair where Oscar used to sit and show me videos of women he found superior to me, and he just wept. He explained the full, elaborate con Oscar had run on him. It had started in early May, right around the time he'd moved to the couch. Oscar had approached my dad with a story that was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation. He told my dad he was planning to propose to me, that he wanted to do it somewhere special, somewhere I would never expect. He claimed that he had been researching Korean culture because he knew I was so fascinated by it, a vicious lie, twisting my attempts to please him into the justification for his scheme, and that he wanted to fly me to Seoul for a surprise proposal. My dad, a simple, hard-working man who had always wanted the best for me, was completely taken in. The idea of being in on a secret, of helping to create a perfect, romantic moment for his only daughter, had blinded him to the red flags. Oscar had come prepared with a binder full of printed screenshots, exorbitant flight costs, reservations at 5-star hotels, menus from Michelin-starred restaurants in Seoul. He had crafted a perfect illusion, making the $15,000 price tag seem not just reasonable, but necessary for the trip of a lifetime. My dad told me, his voice cracking, that Oscar had even managed to produce tears when he spoke about how much he loved me and how he wanted to give me the world. I wanted to throw up. This man, who had been emotionally abandoning me for months, who had been chipping away at my self-esteem with his daily critiques, had been simultaneously performing the role of the devoted, love-struck future son-in-law for my father. The most heartbreaking part was that my dad kept apologizing to me, as if he were the one who had done something wrong. I was just so proud, he whispered, wiping his eyes with the back of his rough, calloused hand. I told all my buddies at the construction site how thoughtful my future son-in-law was. $15,000 was more than just money to my dad. It represented years of grueling physical labor, of getting up before dawn in the freezing cold, of skipped lunches and overtime shifts. It was the security he had painstakingly built for his future, and Oscar, who knew all of this, had stolen it without a second thought. That weekend, I became a digital detective, plunging into the depths of Oscar's online life. His Instagram was still active, his last post from June 10th a smiling selfie with a caption, "Big changes coming soon." I had seen it at the time and felt a surge of hope, believing it was about us. Now, it felt like a cruel taunt. His TikTok activity continued right up to the day before he left, a flurry of likes on Korean content. And then, on June 15th, silence. But the real poison was in his old comments. I had never bothered to look before, because why would I? I trusted him. Now, scrolling through his past interactions was like reading a secret diary of his contempt for me. He hadn't just been a passive viewer, he had been an active participant, leaving comments like "so beautiful" and "perfect skin" on countless videos. One comment, from mid-May, made my vision go red. On a video of an influencer's morning routine, he had written, "My girlfriend should learn from you." It was a public declaration of my failure to meet his standards. And then I found it. The key that unlocked the entire mystery. On June 12th, on a video from an account called Akimi Sun Beauty, Oscar had commented, "Can't wait to meet you soon." The account had replied, "See you in Seoul," followed by a string of heart emojis. I clicked on the profile. It was a perfect distillation of everything he had been obsessing over. A stunningly beautiful Korean girl with flawless skin, posing in designer clothes against the backdrop of aesthetic coffee shops. But something felt wrong. The photos were too perfect, the lighting always flawless, her expression in every shot an identical, vacant smile. It was like looking at a doll, not a person. I took screenshots of everything, the profile, the comments, the photos, my instincts screaming that this evidence would soon disappear. Then, I did what any woman pushed to the brink would do. I sent Oscar a single, final WhatsApp message. It contained all the screenshots. My text was blunt. "I know about Akimi Sun Beauty. I know you stole my father's retirement money to meet your Korean fantasy girl. I hope she was worth destroying 2 families for." The message delivered. It was never read. The situation continued to unravel. On June 22nd, Oscar's mother called me, her voice trembling with confusion and worry. She had no idea her son had left the country. He had told his family he was taking some personal time to work on things. When I told her he was in South Korea, there was a long, stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then she asked a question that confirmed my suspicions were not just in my head. Is this about his Asian girl obsession? Apparently, his brother had mentioned it to her weeks ago. Oscar had been telling his entire family about the superiority of Asian women for months. His mother was mortified, explaining that she'd noticed his strange comments about appearance during their video calls, but she had dismissed it as another one of his fleeting hyperfixations, like his brief foray into cryptocurrency or the 3 months he was convinced he was going to become a professional bodybuilder. But this was different. This time, his obsession had victims. And still, not a single word from Oscar himself. It had been a full week of silence. The Akimi Sun Beauty account had gone private shortly after I found it. My attempt to follow it from a newly created burner account was left pending. It was clear the door to that world had been slammed shut. Then, last night, Jerry called again. He'd received a bizarre, cryptic text message from Oscar from an international number. All it said was, "Need to talk to you urgently. Don't tell anyone yet." Jerry had replied, asking what was wrong, but had received no further response. He forwarded me the screenshot, a question hanging in the air. Was Oscar in trouble? Looking at that short, panicked message, I knew something had gone catastrophically wrong. The confident man in the airport photo was gone, replaced by someone desperate and scared. But his first instinct wasn't to contact me or my father, the people he had wronged. It was to hide, to triangulate through a friend, to avoid accountability. I told Jerry to respond if Oscar texted again, but to make it clear that the only path forward was to call me and my dad. I wasn't going to be his emergency contact, his rescuer, his backup plan. Because I had a very strong feeling that Oscar's Korean fantasy had collided with a harsh reality, and the resulting explosion had left him stranded in the wreckage. I was no longer the girl who straightened her hair for his approval. I was the woman who was about to watch him face the consequences of his own delusional choices. I'm writing this at 2 in the morning, sleep an impossible prospect, my mind still buzzing from the events of the day. The phone call I had been simultaneously dreading and hoping for finally came yesterday morning. An international number flashed on my screen, and when I answered, his voice, frantic and thin, crackled through the terrible connection. It was Oscar. He didn't bother with a hello, just launched into a panicked, disjointed monologue about how everything had gone wrong, how he was stranded, how he needed my help to get home. I cut him off, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "Do you really think you can just call me for help after you stole my father's retirement money and vanished for a week?" He started begging then, a pathetic, wheezing sound. He was stuck in some cheap guest house in Seoul, he claimed, with no money, a cancelled return flight, and credit cards that weren't working. It was all a misunderstanding, he insisted, a series of unfortunate events he could explain if I would just help him. The sheer, unmitigated audacity was breathtaking. I gave him one chance. Explain where my father's $15,000 went, and explain why you lied about a proposal. His story was a pathetic, transparent lie. He claimed he had been planning to propose, but had decided to fly to Seoul alone first, as a scouting trip to ensure everything would be perfect for me. The packed bags and the one-way ticket were just details. When I brought up Akimi Sun Beauty and his comment about meeting her, he went silent, a long, damning pause that stretched across continents. He tried to backtrack, claiming she was just a travel blogger who had been giving him tips. But he had no explanation for the comment about his girlfriend needing to learn from her, or for his own obsessive online behavior. He got defensive, accusing me of twisting things, of being suspicious. The conversation was a dizzying carousel of excuses. When the scouting trip life failed, he pivoted to work stress. When that didn't work, he tried to blame our relationship, saying he'd felt lost and that exploring Korean culture was meant to be something that would ultimately bring us closer. The final, most infuriating tactic was to turn it all around on me. He actually had the gall to say that I had been the one obsessed with Korean beauty, that he was only trying to understand my interests. He pointed to the skincare products I'd bought and the hair straightener I'd used as proof, conveniently forgetting that my actions were a direct, desperate response to his relentless criticism. I listed his offenses back to him, one by one, like a prosecutor delivering a closing argument. The comment about Asian girls staying petite. The daily TikTok tutorials. The comparison of my hair texture to that of strangers online. Each time, he would deny, deflect, or claim I was misremembering. Finally, I told him I was done. He needed to call my father and arrange to pay back the money. That's when he lost it, yelling that I was being unsympathetic to his crisis, that I was supposed to be his supportive girlfriend. I hung up. He called back 6 more times. Each call was a new performance. On the second call, he tried crying, murmuring about the terrible mistakes he'd made without ever naming them. On the third, he tried to negotiate, promising to pay my dad back if I would just wire him money for a flight home. On the fourth, he got angry, accusing me of being vindictive and petty for not immediately rushing to his rescue. My mother, who had been staying with me, had been listening to this entire circus, her face growing darker with each call. She had been a quiet but furious presence in my living room, a lioness watching her cub being tormented. During Oscar's 6th call, as I was finally breaking down into tears of sheer frustration, she snapped. She strode across the room, snatched the phone from my hand, and put it on speaker. The force of her rage was biblical. "You are a pathetic excuse for a man," she snarled. Her voice, usually so gentle from years of teaching kindergartners, was now laced with steel. "You stole money from a hardworking father, and you broke his daughter's heart with your disgusting online obsession. If you call her one more time without $15,000 to wire back to my ex-husband, I will personally fly to Seoul and drag you home by your ears." She systematically dismantled every lie he had told. She'd heard it all. She brought up the skincare products, the skipped meals, the constant comparisons. She asked him direct, unanswerable questions. Why had he packed his winter clothes for a summer trip? Why had he quit his job for a scouting trip? Why had he stopped contributing to household bills in May while planning this grand adventure? When she brought up Akimi Sun Beauty, he tried to feign ignorance, but my mom informed him that she had seen the screenshots. The 20-minute phone call was a masterclass in maternal fury. She exposed him not just as a thief and a liar, but as a fool. By the end, Oscar was sobbing, admitting things had gotten complicated, but still insisting he could fix everything. "You have 48 hours to wire the money back," my mom declared, "or we're filing a police report for fraud. Your problems in Korea are your own to solve." She hung up and immediately called my dad. That evening, the three of us, my divorced parents and I, sat in my living room, a strange and united front. We laid out all the evidence, and my dad admitted how foolish he felt for falling for Oscar's act. My mom pointed out that Oscar hadn't just been a con man, he'd been a predator, specifically targeting my dad's love for me as his primary weapon. The next morning, Oscar called again. This time, his voice was different. The manipulation was gone, replaced by a hollow, defeated fear. He said someone had scammed him, that he'd lost everything. I told him he needed to be completely honest about Akimi Sun Beauty if he expected even a sliver of understanding. There was a long silence. Then he said the words that made the entire, twisted saga click into place. "The person I went to meet, she isn't who she claimed to be." He confessed that he had never planned to propose. He had fallen for someone he met online, someone he thought was perfect, and he had used my father's money to chase a delusion. But something had gone horribly wrong, and now he was alone and terrified. It was then I realized his fantasy had become a nightmare. And he was about to tell me just how deep the darkness went. Grab your popcorn, because the conclusion to this saga is more pathetic, more karmic, and more hilariously satisfying than I ever could have imagined. When Oscar called back as promised, my mom was sitting right beside me, a silent, grim-faced sentinel. I put him on speakerphone, ready for the final act of his manipulative theater. But what we got was a confession so absurd, so utterly ridiculous, that all I could do was laugh. His voice was broken, stripped of all its previous bluster. He said he needed to tell me the complete truth. And then he said it. "Akimi Sun Beauty isn't a real person." I stared at the phone. He continued, his voice small and ashamed. "She was a fake. A scam. They used AI to create her." I burst out laughing. It wasn't a small chuckle, it was a loud, uncontrollable, gut-busting cackle that echoed through my apartment. I laughed until tears streamed down my face. My mom looked at me, bewildered, but I couldn't stop. This man, the man who had spent months systematically dismantling my self-worth, who had stolen my father's life savings, who had abandoned our life together, had done it all for a computer program, a catfish created by criminals. He kept talking over my laughter, his voice a pathetic murmur as he explained the scam. The direct messages had started in early May. The scammers had used AI face-swapping technology to create an endless stream of photos and videos of a perfect, non-existent woman. They had even used AI voice generation to send him voice messages, a synthetic Korean girl speaking English, complimenting him, telling him he was handsome, that he was the perfect American boyfriend she'd been searching for. He had fallen for it, hook, line, and sinker, pouring his heart out to a sophisticated algorithm designed to prey on lonely, delusional men. When he finally got to the part about their planned meeting at a coffee shop in Seoul, I was practically hysterical. He had waited there for 6 hours, a sad, hopeful fool, messaging an account that had already been deleted. He had spent 2 more days frantically searching for a woman who only existed on a server somewhere until other users finally informed him he had been catfished. But the humiliation didn't stop there. I asked him how much money he had sent her before the trip. $3,000. She had needed money for new clothes to look perfect for him, for her phone bill, for her sick grandmother. Every classic scam in the book. So, of the $15,000 he had stolen, he had already pissed away $3,000 on his AI girlfriend before even leaving the country. He was now stranded, his credit cards maxed out from his obsessive spending and the scam, staying in a roach-infested guest house, and living off convenience store ramen. He had finally called his parents, who were, to put it mildly, horrified. His father, after hearing the full, pathetic story, had called him a disgrace and said he was ashamed to have raised such a fool. But here's the most beautiful part of all. Oscar's parents, 2 decent people caught in their son's whirlwind of idiocy, had immediately called my father. His mother had apologized profusely and offered to wire my dad the full $15,000 back immediately, even if it meant draining their own emergency savings. They were taking full responsibility for the mess their son had made. Hearing this, my rage finally returned, eclipsing my laughter. "You are the most pathetic excuse for a human being I have ever encountered," I told him. "You destroyed multiple families because you're too stupid to tell the difference between a real woman and a computer program." My mom took the phone. "Your parents showed more integrity in one phone call than you've shown in your entire life," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "This is like watching a toddler touch a hot stove after being told not to. You are an embarrassment." Oscar, sobbing, started begging for another chance. He loved me. He had learned his lesson. He would never look at Korean content again. I snatched the phone back. "Are you out of your mind?" I screamed. "You spent months making me feel ugly compared to a fake person, and now you want my sympathy because your fantasy blew up in your face?"
No.
"I'm done." I told him that I was moving on, that I was going to the gym for myself, using the skincare for myself, learning to be happy without his constant, toxic presence. He tried to interrupt, but I talked over him. I told him real change would have been him recognizing his abusive behavior months ago, not just feeling sorry for himself when he got played. He had the nerve to say my reaction was proving that Korean women were more forgiving. "Real Korean women would think you're a pathetic loser too." I shot back. "The only reason your AI girlfriend was nice to you was because she was programmed to take money from sad, lonely men like you." I told him his parents could figure out how to get him home, and that if he ever tried to contact me or my family again, we would involve the police.
And that was it.
His parents did wire him the money. According to Jerry, he's been back for 3 days, grounded like a teenager, staying with his parents because he has nowhere else to go. They've taken away his internet access until he gets therapy for his internet addiction and his tenuous grip on reality. They're making him get a job to pay them back for the flight and the money they sent my dad. My dad got his $15,000 back yesterday, plus an extra $1,000 from Oscar's parents as an apology. He's learned his lesson about wedding planning, but he's proud of how I handled everything. My mom now tells the story of Oscar's AI girlfriend at every opportunity, finding it the most hilarious cautionary tale she's ever heard. So, to everyone who said he'd come crawling back when reality hit, you were right. But none of us could have ever predicted a reality this pathetic, this perfectly, poetically just. He didn't just lose me. He lost his dignity, his family's respect, and a significant amount of money, all for a woman who is literally a figment of a computer's imagination. Karma, it turns out, has a wicked sense of humor.